Hey there, cats and kitties. I am the Blues Man, Johnny Blues, and with this video, I'll be discussing my thoughts on episode 9 of the anime series Onihei. And I love this episode because it's once again calling back on the past of Heizo Hasegawa in his younger ne'er-do-well days. He's really cruising for bruising, and that's because a lot of his life is just simply effed up. It's really messed up, and he's very much in need of something to propel him to a more productive and positive outlook in his life. Give him some kind of positive direction. And this is the episode that, that finally transpires in. And I loved calling back on so much of his past, seeing like callbacks to previous episodes like Samanosuke and Hikoju, the thief sake shop, Omasa and her father, and all this kind of stuff, which gives you, it builds up the lore of the series and the sort of mythic nature of Heizo as a person. I love that we're actually seeing him as not being so sort of perfect as he kind of is, the sensibilities around him as a lawman in the modern sense. He wasn't always that way, and I love that. I love seeing his sort of skirting the line of a criminalistic journey, something he almost considered completely absorbing himself into, a life of thievery and all that kind of stuff, in a sort of pseudo-rebellion, if you will, because we see his family life is anything but perfect. He's got a stepmother who is a raging bitch and is, holds nothing but contempt for him because she considers him to be the illegitimate offspring of her husband, his father, and another woman. And in seeking a potential family heir, she wants nothing to do with Heizo. It's putting him out of the home physically as well as emotionally. He doesn't want any investment in it. He only comes back to his father when he needs financial sustenance because, he's spending a lot of his time gambling, getting drunk, spending time with women. He's just directionless. He's circling the drain, and he's so cocksure and full of himself that it's just kind of amazing to me that he doesn't immediately go off a cliff. There's every chance and every possibility of that happening before finally being introduced to this man by the name of Matsuoka, who he kind of, this guy takes Heizo under his tutelage and under his guidance in a sense because he sees the prowess Heizo has. In his dojo where Heizo is studying, he's kind of taking on everybody, and he believes himself to be untouchable, invincible, and unconquerable, undefeatable. And this guy Matsuoka, he comes in one day looking for a challenge, and this challenge ends up happening with Heizo's dojo's master, where he and Matsuoka are just facing each other and standing there and gaining a sweat, and nothing's happening. They're standing there for upwards of a half an hour, just standing, facing each other, holding these wooden practice swords. Nothing is happening. And I was of the mind that what's probably actually happening is these men are looking at each other. There's a level of the presence that Matsuoka exudes and the powerhouse nature of him. He almost doesn't have to lift a finger for you to really have that wash over you. And this is something that rubs Heizo the wrong way. He's so cocksure. He's like, I'm going to take this guy on. I'm going to mess him up. Who does he think he is coming in here and sort of diminishing the dojo master in front of everybody and everything like that? But you don't need that. I'm sitting there thinking, if anything's happening, maybe what's actually happening is something in the minds of Matsuoka and the dojo sensei, that they're fighting internally. They're predicting each other's moves and considering how they might approach each other and the moves they might make and everything like that. It's getting more and more intense. And I don't know if that's exactly what was happening. There's no dialogue to suggest that. It's something I've seen before in other similar scenarios in anime and films dealing with samurai and that kind of thing. And I don't know if it was anything to do with like predictive movements and that kind of thing. Drawing out the battle, strategizing in one's mind, the scope of the mindscape, if you will. Or if it was alternatively, because there's a point later in the episode where the dojo master and Matsuoka are having a conversation. He's like thanking him for coming in and trying to rein some of these students and everything in and get them more focused and crunch down on them a little bit more. Were it not for Matsuoka's help, that might not have been achieved. And it got me suspecting maybe this was a deliberate ploy, that this dojo master had called Matsuoka in, knowing of his prowess. Maybe they have a previous history, something like that, and this was all for show. That, standoff between them where nothing is happening. Maybe it was just like a showing off to make everyone aware of this guy's presence and his abilities, that the dojo master is not going to make even one hint of a move toward him, because all hell's going to break loose or something like that, just to show the magnetism, that nature, the prowess that Matsuoka, exudes. And because Heizo reacts so poorly to this, he immediately lunges at him and gets his hand smacked, for his good graces, for making that jump, that attempt to take him down. And he's very sort of smarting after that, This sends him out again, going to the thief sake shop and just sort of drowning his sorrows because of his evil stepmother, and because of the frustration of having to keep going to his father for money and that kind of sustenance and support, and feeling ashamed of himself. He's aware of his directionless life, and something needs to set him on a better path. And Matsuoka, having this conversation with the dojo master, he's like, Heizo's the one with the promise. If anyone here, he's got something more, even though the brunt of everything we've seen with him is that cocksure, very full of himself attitude, that invincible quality. There's something more than any other of the students in the dojo has. And this speaks to a level of promise. There's also a level of, the dojo master explains to Matsuoka the family environment, familial, all of that kind of stuff, all the frustrations there with Heizo. And, it's unclear whether Matsuoka is lying or not, but he catches up with Heizo. He helps Heizo and Samanosuke out after they had been gambling one night, and they were trying to get gypped out of their money, fooled out of their money, and, they didn't sit pretty with that. They took the gambling crew out, and then these guys caught up with them later. They wanted the money they considered, Heizo and Samanosuke rightfully took back. They wanted it back for their own. They were going to take his life. And there is Matsuoka to send these guys packing, and he's like, Heizo, come with me. We're going to spend some time. And this is where he lays down this story about how he very much relates to Heizo, and he feels very simpatico with him, that he's had a kind of similar situation with his life, being an illegitimate son of a priest, I think, even, which is that much more so, sort of controversial in the day. And really, Matsuoka is trying to appeal to Heizo and really set him on a better path, because if there's anything he wants in the least, it's for Heizo not to follow down the dark, sort of path Matsuoka himself had gone down. And you don't really know the full swing of that, even though I was perceiving it. The entire conversation between Matsuoka and Heizo really kind of reminded me of like a big boss, solid snake relationship. I was just waiting for that so-called betrayal, the other leg to drop along those lines to actually happen. And of course, that ended up being the case, because Ikoju comes to Samanosuke and, of course, the young Heizo, and says, well, I know there's this roaming thief. As soon as I heard roaming thief, and after the conversation Matsuoka had with Heizo, I was like, okay, we know who this is. Who's going to steal some money, and you're going to get 50 ryo for it, and all this kind of stuff. And Heizo, he's like, all right, yeah, let's rock and roll. All you have to do, you don't have to be part of the crew or anything like that. You are going to be the getaway driver. You're going to have a boat at the ready, and we're going to get the hell out of Dodge. And Heizo's all for it. Samanosuke's all for it. And this is where they're confronted with Matsuoka being that roaming thief. And Matsuoka almost loses his ever-loving mind. He grabs Heizo and he's like, what the hell did I tell you? He's crying because he feels a level, it's a dual betrayal. It's like his own betrayal, adhering to his own dark thievery past. But also, he's looking upon Heizo as, didn't you hear what I said? Didn't you listen? Don't you understand? Don't do this with your life. Do something better. Don't do something that would sort of set against your dojo master and disrespect him and bring, ill will upon him or an ill reputation and all these things. You don't jeopardize that. You have a better estimation of him, and you have a better estimation of yourself and everything you do from here on out. And to see Matsuoka just leaving, and tearfully so emotionally distraught at having confronted Heizo in that moment, that everything he had said to that point fell on deaf ears because, you're not going to, like a light switch, change someone's personality and their ambitions overnight, their frustrations. But by that point, it was enough to redirect the kind of person Heizo was and whom he was very jeopardizedly becoming, and redirected his path. And I love by the end of the episode, Heizo's wife asks, well, whatever happened to Matsuoka Sensei? Do you know? And of course, Heizo doesn't. But he's reflecting back on the fact that were it not for Matsuoka Sensei, the Heizo that is living, breathing, alive today, the lawman that he is, may never have come into existence, may never have found his way. And what does that speak for the life Heizo might have lived alternatively? Would he have even been still alive at this point? Perhaps he would have been rotting away in a prison cell or having been assassinated as a result of some kind of criminal activity and all that stuff. And, it's only sort of one more extra punch that we find his son coming back. Oh, I didn't realize everyone was still here. I forgot something, for my sword studies. And Heizo's like, the gambling money, huh? And he's like, oh, yeah. He completely catches his son in a BS story. I loved it. I loved the charm and that noirish sort of story structure and nature of calling back on Heizo's past, of all the familiar characters that we've seen. He's known for a very long time in his life. And it just really, again, built up the structure of the mythology, if you will, of this story, of its characters, of Heizo as the Onihei and everything like that. It's very rare that you encounter a hero who is vulnerable and perhaps even making the wrong choices and having to be on a learning curve from his youth and like a hero that is imperfect, put it that way. And that's very much what Heizo was. He was an imperfect human being, but he found a better way, and it was ironically for the influences of someone who could not break of an ill path himself. And I loved this episode. I loved this series. And I think the last episode was the only one that really skirted the line of just kind of, not being on par with all the previous, for me personally, as being enjoyable and sucking me in and compelling me and, keeping me on the edge of my seat and just, the sort of making me want to gravitate toward it that much more and really just wash myself with the entire world that is set up and depicted in the series. Every episode has been gangbusters, stellar, and I love it. And this was no exception. I'd love to hear from you guys in the comments below. If you've seen episode 9 of Onihei, if you agree with me, if you enjoyed it as much as I did. If not, why not? Let me know in the comments below. Love having that conversation, even if our POVs happen to disagree. But I'd be surprised, quite frankly, if you didn't find any enjoyment or pleasure or intrigue out of an episode like this one. I just think it had everything going for it, and it nailed it on the head as far as entertainment value, if nothing else. And so yeah, otherwise that'll be pretty much it for me on this. Hope this video finds you well, and I'll catch you all later. Peace.